Hello. Welcome to This Week in Politics. This week, we're going to take a look at two stories. One of them is just going to take a couple of minutes. The other one, I want to do kind of an in-depth look at the state of the Democratic Party. Now, you might say, well, why do you want to look at the Democratic Party? Well, the Democratic Party, as we have known it in my lifetime, is not the same Democratic Party. They are completely different. Their belief system has completely changed. The way they do things has completely changed, and we need to understand who they are and what we can expect from them, because what I expect from them is going to probably surprise you. So the first story I want to talk about was, and this one really kind of surprised me. Gallop did a new poll this last month, and they asked uh, certain age groups what was their did they have a favorable view of socialism? That was the question. Do you have a favorable view of socialism? In the 18 to 29-year-old category, 51%. 51% have a favorable view of socialism. That's the millennials. Now, I've done many programs on this, and I think it's a combination of reasons of why they have a favorable view. Number one, they've never seen anything like Donald Trump. They've never seen conservatism in action. I mean, so let's say that 30 years old. Let's see, 30 years ago would have been Bill Clinton was president. Think of the presidents we've had since Clinton. All right. So, or maybe it was HW. But anyway, they've never seen real conservatism work. All they've seen is socialism under the guise of progressive liberalism. It's really socialism. And I want to say at the outset here, most millennials don't even understand what the term socialism means. It's a fancy word, a new word uh, made big by Bernie Sanders, the Berniecrats. All right. For those of you that really want to know what socialism is, go to the dictionary or Google it. Socialism is where all of the means of production is owned by the government. That means all means, the auto plants, all of the utilities, all of the steel manufacturing, all of the banks, all of the press, everything is owned by the government. And then the government takes all the money from those and doles out as it sees fit to the masses of people. That's socialism. Now, 18 to 29-year-olds, the millennials, have a 51% favorable view of socialism. That's scary. Now, the 30 to 49-year-olds, again, when these people were young, they probably remember Reagan, but barely, because they were small. All right. They have a 41% favorable view of socialism. And the 50 to 64, now in this category, we remember how conservatism worked in the robust 80s. 30% in that category have a favorable view of socialism. And I would like to say here that nationwide, probably 40 to 50% of the population would classify themselves as Democrats. And since the far left is in charge, the fact that 30% in this age group, I would be willing to bet, are all Democrats, and they all have a favorable view of socialism. 30%. And the 65 and over, 28%. Again, probably half of the Democrats. And Democrats have a far more favorable view over socialism. Now, here's what I have to say on this issue. Name me one successful country at any time in history where socialism has worked. And trust me, it's been tried many, many times. One of the ex-world powers, Russia, was a socialist country. You know, the USSR, United Soviet Socialist Republic. And for you millennials, if you didn't know that, that's what USSR stands for. Failed. Now, before it failed, we would see pictures some of the times on our news about long lines. Remember I said that it is all the methods of production are owned by the state, and then everything is passed out as the politicians see fit. Well, the problem with socialism is you eventually run out of everybody else's money. So eventually, and it doesn't matter how long it takes, but eventually, food starts to dry up, goods start to dry up. And in Russia, towards the end of theirs, people would stand in line for days to get toilet paper, and you couldn't get meat unless you hunted. The people were starving. But the top 1%, which was all politicians, lived very well. The problem is you always run out of other people's money. And if you don't believe me, right here today, take a look at Venezuela. That used to be, before Maduro went in there, that used to be one of the richest countries in South America, and it was a capitalist society. Maduro came in, turned it socialist, and here we are 20 years later, and there's writing in the streets. Their currency isn't worth the paper it's written on, and there's civil unrest. That cut something. That's a tinderbox. Something's going to happen. Either the dictator will be killed, or run out of office, a coup d'état. Something's going to happen. You can't have a whole country of starving people and do nothing. But Venezuela is a good case in point. It never, ever works. So then I sat down and I thought about, well, how did we get here? I mean, how did the strongest, most capitalistic society in the history of man get to the point where 51% of our millennials have a favorable view of socialism? How do we get here? And I came up with a few, and I told you one. They've never seen conservatism uh, up close and personal. They're afraid of it because they've never seen it work. And if you're a millennial and you're watching this, you are watching it. Donald Trump is doing exactly what a conservative would do. Everything he's done is right down the playbook. But here's some other causes. Indoctrination in schools. You might think that the millennials were taught about conservatism in school. They were not. You might think that they were taught about Reaganism. They were, but what they were taught was it was voodoo economics. It didn't work. Nothing could be further from the truth. Ronald Reagan was responsible for the longest peacetime economic boom this country's ever seen. Another outcome is the atmosphere on our college campuses. Violence is acceptable and condoned by the administration on our college campuses when it comes to Republican or conservative people coming to their campuses. I mean, it's encouraged, and they call it free speech. If you do that to a liberal, now you're a hater. You're a bigot. You're a narcissist. You're a deplorable. If liberals do it to conservatives, it's free speech. If conservatives do it to liberals, we're deplorables. And they use force. There has been much violence on our college campuses when uh, conservatives go to speak on campus. Another one is the Berniecrats. Now, the average millennial looks at Bernie Sanders and says he's a nice old man. He wants to give us free college and free this and free that. Let me answer a couple of those. He wants to say Medicare for everyone. Okay, sounds great. They have done the studies. Okay, our country has a $4 trillion budget. Okay, $4 trillion. It would take $3.6 trillion a year just for Medicare for everyone. That means we would have to double our budget just for that one thing. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to pay double taxes. I don't want my tax, and that gives no wiggle room. That means that every year after that, taxes would have to go up because medical costs would go up. And when the government gets involved, it becomes uneconomically viable. Our education, free college is another one of his. We have trillions of dollars out in student loans right now, and that's just for the ones that got the loans. Think of all the ones that didn't get loans. So the two things that he wants to give away for free that all the millennials want is going to have to triple our taxes just for those. Millennials have not sat down and thought this through. Another one that and I'm going to talk more about this later, is when the kids have gone through school, and I said indoctrination, one of the things that the left has been extremely good at indoctrinating our kids with is making a distinction in their minds between the taxes that we pay and the money that the government has. Most people do not understand that the money that the government pays out is our money. If you ask somebody, well, who's going to pay for the free health care? Their answer will be the government. No, that's the wrong answer. Taxpayers will be paying for that. So let's think about this critically for a second, okay? All you millennials out there. For you to get a 4-year free education, okay? Your taxes will have to double for the rest of your life to pay for yours and everybody else's education for today and for the rest of your life. Let me ask you something. You're 30 years old. Do you think a car costs the same today as it did 30 years ago? And you're laughing and you say, no, of course not. Well, what makes you think that healthcare will cost the same 30 years from now as it does today? Or that a college education will cost the same in 30 years as it does today? It won't. It will double. The cost of things and I can't prove this except through experience, but on average, things tend to double in cost every 10 to 12 years. Whether through inflation, through the cost of production, through whatever the reason, that tends to happen. But let's say that it just doubles. the cost of those two things just happens to double in the next 30 years. That means once again, your taxes will have to double again from what they are after they're doubled this time. But let's say that I'm right, and the cost of education doubles every 15 years. Let's just say 15 years, okay? So to get it started, your taxes have to double. So you're now going to go from 20% taxes to 40% taxes, okay? And then 15 years from now, they have to double again. And then another 15 years, they have to double again. You see? The longer it goes, the more of your money they have to take. And eventually, 40, 50 years down the road, there's no more taxes to be had. Everybody is being taxed at 100%. So now all of your taxes are going to the government, and now the government is going to have to pay. You see what I'm saying? If you take it out logically, and we just did that on education, add in their Medicare for everyone. It's the same concept. So anyway, another cause is that our students have not been taught to think critically. They think they have. They have been taught what to think and how to think like everybody else. Have you ever wondered why some people drop out of school and become extremely successful? Did you know that Thomas Jefferson, no, Benjamin Franklin, was kicked out of school, and the principal and the teachers told his parents that he was stupid and he would never amount to anything? It wasn't true. He just didn't think like everybody else thought. And look at his life. I mean, good heavens. He invented all kinds of stuff. He was a genius because he knew how to think outside the box. He knew how to ask questions. He knew how to think critically, not to think like the collective people think. I have noticed most millennials are too lazy to do the research. Now, they think they get on Google and they find out facts, and they think that's research. That's not research. Think about how that information gets on Google, and then think about who controls Google and who polices the content that goes on Google. When you Google something, you are getting the content that Google wants you to get. Go find the real information instead of going to Google. How do you do that? Well, take some time and figure it out. As an example, when I did a series of biographies on all of the Republican presidential candidates, and I went and did the research. Yes, I Googled them. Yes, I went to their web pages. But I also went inside their web pages and I read their books and I listened to their speeches. That's the only way you will find and learn to think critically. I think another contributing factor is that the media, the movies, Hollywood, the TV, the social media, the newspapers, the magazines, the periodicals are all controlled by the left. An example this week is the story that I called the Taos compound. Actually, it was last week. There was 11 kids found starving to death, roasting out in the desert in a compound, uh, and it was run by a Muslim radical jihadist uh, whose father was a radicalized imam in Brooklyn, New York, and he was an unindicted co-conspirator in the World Trade Center. And you know what? It took a couple of days for the mainstream media controlled by the left to even mention the story. And when they did, they left all those facts out. They didn't even use his name. They said the man. When they finally used his name later in the week, they didn't say anything about him being a radicalized Muslim, a jihadist, um, barely mentioned his father in Brooklyn. I mean, this is what the left wants you to see. They're only going to give you what they absolutely have to, and even then, they're not going to give it all to you. They're going to give you what they want you to get. You have to go find the true story. The majority, another contributing factor for the majority of the millennials, uh, the majority of their adulthood and most of their teenager, they had Obama as their president. He's the most socialist president this country has ever seen. He was a Muslim, no question. And everything he did was to the detriment of our country, without question. And I documented in programs. I've done that for years on the right wing reverend. Which, by the way, let me take a second and say, if you'd like to hear some of those programs, go to our website. It's prayerboxministry.org. Go over there and take a look at it. Click on Right Wing Reverend. We just recently about doubled our content over there. You can listen to all of our programs. We've done many series over there on like American preachers, and we did one on the Republican presidential nominees. But there's a lot over there. That website is an interactive website. Go over there and check us out. So those, I believe, are the contributing factors to why this country has a semi-favorable view of socialism. Now, our job as conservatives and as the adults in the room is to take this opportunity to teach our millennials about capitalism and conservatism. What this country is experiencing right now is unbelievable, and the press isn't telling you about it. We have more jobs available in this country right now than we have people. That's amazing. And yet, we have the largest economic growth in 30 years. Now, the left likes to point out that under Obama, we had a couple of quarters where he had 4% growth, and that's true. The problem with that is it was a glitch. There was something happening. It was after many months of being down, something happened and there was a glitch. What you're experiencing now under Trump is this is going to be a sustainable, long-term pattern of growth, and that's the difference. The first quarter he was in office, when he went through and got all of those regulations down, we went from 1.2 to 3.1% of GDP in one quarter. That is unheard of. We more than doubled our GDP in one quarter just by getting rid of regulation. So when you hear, again, you need to do the research. You know, anybody can spout. There was a saying when I was a kid, figures don't lie, but liars can figure. And it's true. But if you teach the millennials now about the difference between socialism and capitalism and liberalism and conservatism, and let them watch it, let them experience over the next 8 years. It's going to be phenomenal. And keep reminding them of what it was like under Obama so they don't forget. All right. So now the story that I want to go in depth on is called The State of the Democratic Party. And I decided I wanted to do this because the Democratic Party is I knew it growing up doesn't exist anymore. And they have gone, and history proves that politics in this country runs in a pendulum, and I said 10 years ago, I kind of hope Obama wins, because after him as a president, history says we will get a conservative, because Americans will finally remember what it's like to live under a liberal Democrat, and they'll hate it and they'll run to the most conservative they can find. And they did. And then after Trump, then it'll probably swing back towards the middle. But what has happened now, the middle has changed, because what should be the Democrats has now become the Bernie-crats. The poll we just had, 51% of the millennials are going to go far, far left, unless we can change it between now and 2024. So, but I wanted to take a look at the state of the Democratic Party today, and we're going to cover some topics about that. And then at the end, I want to go through some conclusions we can draw, and then I'm going to list the main policy points that the Democrats have. Now, I want to say up front that conservatives always win elections when they run on ideas and ideals, and I've said that for years. Democrats don't have values and ideals. They have policy statements. If you ask a Democrat, a far left winger, where do you stand on abortion? Oh, I'm pro-choice. Well, why are you pro-choice? Because it's a woman's right. It's a woman's right for what? It's just a right. Oh, it is. Okay. Show me where it says that in the Constitution. You see, they have no ideals. They have no values. They have policy stands. You ask a conservative where they stand on abortion, and they will say, I am pro-life, I am anti-abortion. Well, why do you believe that? Because God's word says it's murder. Where does it say that? All the way through the Bible. God knew you, formed you in your mother's womb. Life begins at conception. You see the difference? One is a belief, one is an ideal, one is an idea. The other one is a policy statement. Democrats have policy statements, so we're going to cover those. Okay. The first example of the current state of the Democratic Party, this one kind of surprised me when it happened. And I'm going to call this one Keith Ellison. He is the co-chairman of the Democratic National Committee. He also happens to be a Muslim. Okay. And I was really surprised when the Democrats did that, because, in my opinion, having a Muslim in charge of the Democratic National Committee is suicide. But they did. And this guy was a congressman, I believe. He is now running for the Attorney General in the state of Wisconsin. And it looks like he's going to win. Easily, by the way. But let's take a look at Keith Ellison. You say, well, just because he's Muslim shouldn't keep him out. Well, first off, in my opinion, it does. We are still at war with terrorism, and this guy is a Muslim. Does Muslim equal terrorism? No, but terrorism definitely equals Muslim. It came out this week that there have been 2 cases of domestic abuse filed against this man. Documented, by the way. One with a 911 phone call, and another one with social media input from the woman and her son who lived with them. So these are 2 verifiable cases. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to ask yourself this question. If this guy had been a Republican and had 2 cases of domestic abuse against him, what would have happened? The press would have run this guy out of office. He would have had to give up his chairmanship, all of that. But because this guy is a Muslim and a ultra left winger, nothing happened. He went on to his election, he won easily, and now he's going to become the Attorney General in Wisconsin. This guy, and I can't remember their names, I didn't write them down, but this guy is in strong support of the 2 people who have killed policemen. One of them is in Cuba, and he did not want Obama to increase relations with Cuba because he was afraid that this lady would be extradited back to the States and punished for her crime of killing a policeman. He wants her protected. Is that really the viewpoint that we should have for an attorney general of any state, of any guy in power and anywhere? I don't think so. And yet, this guy ran for attorney general in a field of 5 people, and he won by 30 points over the second place person. That, to me, speaks volumes of the state of the Democratic Party. Unbelievable. Two people, that lady from New York who won, Cortez, won in New York City, and Bernie Sanders took to the road a couple of weeks ago espousing socialism under the banner of Democrats. They both won. They both caucus with the Democrats, but they're out there espousing the benefits of socialism. They have lied about socialism, which we covered earlier. And for the most part, millennials are clueless about what socialism is. They are bringing the Democrats are bringing socialism into the United States under the guise of democracy or Democrats to give it legitimacy. So the Democratic Party is legitimizing socialism in our country by allowing this Cortez and Sanders, not just allowing, but encouraging and these two to go on the road espousing socialism. And they do, unabashedly. You know, Bernie likes to call it democratic socialist. And when you say, well, is that socialism? And he'll say, no, not at all. But then you ask him about what he believes in socialism. But he put the word democratic in front of it to give it the legitimacy of the Democratic Party. Again, that speaks volumes to me. Another signal of the current state of the Democratic Party is that corruption is acceptable. As long as the goal is what we want, corruption is acceptable. You don't believe me? Let me give you some examples. Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, James Comey, the P file that was a lie given used to spy on the Trump campaign. Stroke, the guy that got fired by the FBI, was a liar and a cheater. Mueller, the investigation, the witch hunt, and the collusion. The 20% of our national uranium supply sold by Hillary Clinton and Obama to the Russians. The Justice Department, working together, the FBI, the CIA, and the Justice Department to overthrow a legitimately elected president. We have double standards in this country for corruption. None of those people have been charged. None of those people will ever see a day in jail, and they should. Every one of them have committed felonies, and we have proof of it. But they will never see, because they know that if one goes down, all of them go down. So the swamp is gathering in and not prosecuting any of them. So we now have a double standard of justice in this country. If you have money, you don't have justice. If you don't have money, you get reverse justice. So we have a double standard for justice in this country, and that started under the Obama administration, by the way. The FISA warrant. Our justice system lied, manipulated information, lied to the judges, spied on American people. They did that to get a warrant to spy on American people and name them and tape them and then investigated them and then lied to cover it up and then destroyed people in the process to try to get to our president. And that has all been done by the Democratic Party. They have promoted violence against Trump, the administration, and Trump voters. Remember Maxine Waters and her hate-filled speech? If you see anybody in the administration in the grocery store or in the gas station, you get out, cause a crowd, and tell them they're not welcome here. We don't want them. Remember that? What about the people that have started fights just randomly with random people who are wearing a hat that says "Make America Great Again," and they walk up and punch them just because? The Democratic Party is encouraging that. If the Republican Party was encouraging that to do that to Democrats, it would be a headline story every day in the paper about the violence being done to liberals. But you don't see any of that in the mainstream media about the violence being done to the conservatives. And I've documented this on all the previous shows. You know, the press secretary Sanders and her family kicked out of a restaurant and harassed. Another lady came home in the administration, I can't remember who it was, came home and her house she was harassed going into her house. They camped outside. They did nasty things to her home. And nobody in the leadership position in the Democratic Party, save one, uh, who was it? The Senate Majority Leader. No, Minority Leader. Came out and he gave like a 2-sentence, we shouldn't do this. And that's all. Notice who has not said a word. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Maxine Waters, uh, Chuck U. Schumer. None of the leaders of the Democratic Party have come out and said, we need to stop this permanently. Don't do this. And told their people to go out and tell these people to stop. Nobody's done that. Nobody's being held accountable. Nobody's being punished because it fits their goal and their narrative to have this done to Trump, his administration, and ultimately his followers. And I think that's terrible. Everything this party does is about hate. They are haters. The Democratic Party has no ideas, no new thing. If when we go over what they stand for on their policy issues, it would have been the same thing 30 years ago. Same stands. They have nothing new to offer. The Republican Party, however, has come in, and what is really ticking them off is we have new ideas. We have beliefs and ideals and things we're going to fight for. They got nothing but hate. If the economy, which is booming now, was doing this under Obama or under Clinton, it would be a headline every day. A new great achievement done by the Democrats. Economy booming. Hillary gets credit. You don't see anything about that. They don't even talk about all the things that's going on. Which, by the way, one of the series that I did on the right-wing reverend last year was I started to do a program just on the successes of his first year in office. And when I started listing them all, I ended up having to do a 3-part program. One for his economic success, his domestic success, and his foreign policy successes. Go over there and listen to those. It's very enlightening. I also did a program on his first 500 days of what he has accomplished in that time. I was going to wait till to do another 3-part series at the end of the year, but he had done so much, I had to get a program in after 500 days. So anyway, now we as conservatives have known for years that the press was left. There always have been liberal Democrats. And if you don't believe me, you can go back and read what Nixon said about the press. Um, uh, he complained that the press was against him, and by the press, he meant the Washington Post, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Huffington Post, all of the press. That's all left-wing press. They still are today. However, up until the Obama administration, um, the press had managed to keep a semblance of objectivity. They would throw in a good story about a conservative once in a while, or they would report the good news on economic fronts to some degree, but they kept a degree of objectivity in their stories. When Obama came in, that all went away. They were outwardly, uh, vociferously, and without argument, ultra left wing liberals. Now, why is that important? The press is given certain privileges in our Constitution, and they were given those privileges not because they're special, not because their job is so important. No, they were given those privileges because their job as journalists is to be an objective check and balance on the government. So, as an example, if we have a Republican administration, they should be an objective check and balance on that. So, but under Obama, what they have become is they have become an extension of the Democratic Party, which means instead of now turning out journalism, what they're turning out is propaganda. And if you don't believe me, look at the numbers. 93% of the mainstream media content has been negative towards Donald Trump. 93%. If they were going to have a semblance of credibility, you would have 50% pro, 50% against. It's nowhere near that. It's 93% against, 7% for, or neutral. That is absolutely unheard of. The media, and because that has happened, and because they have become an extension of the Democratic Party, uh, they have ignored the great financial news. They have ignored the foreign policy triumphs. They have ignored, like we talked earlier, about the Taos compound story. They have ignored Trump's big wins this week. And one of the stories, and this is a great example of the media spewing out the Democrats' line. In a speech a while back, Donald Trump said, "Fake news is the enemy of the people." I agree with him, by the way. The mainstream media took that phrase and they turned it to say that Trump said that the media was the enemy of the people. That's not what he said. He said fake news is the enemy of the people. And the mainstream media, which is 90% of the media coverage in this country, they've all taken the view that he said media is the enemy of the people. Unbelievable. And Trump has come out and he has said, that's not what I said. They're lying. It's fake news. It's fake news that they're lying about fake news. But that's just one example. Uh, you know, here's another one that I caught under the Obama administration. When they would give the GDP numbers, they would always come out and say the GDP was 2.2%. And then a month later, in real tiny print, somewhere you would say that number has been revised downwards to 1.8%. Okay. And it was usually just a 1 or 2 point percentage downward, but it was always modified downward. The big news was it was great. It was out there. We were economically growing, and that was the big news. And then a month later, they say, "Oops, that number needs to be," and nobody caught it. The same is true under Trump, only it's the reverse. They come out and say GDP was at 3%. Then a month later, they come out a little teeny print. That number's been modified upward to 3.1%. It's just a game they play, and the mainstream media does that and has been doing that for years. So what conclusions can we draw from what the issues that I covered about the current state of the Democratic Party? What conclusions can we draw, or should we draw? Well, first off, the Democratic Party is now all about hate and anger, all about that. Any stands they take, any uh, obstructionist things they do in the Senate and the House is all about hate. They hate Trump and they hate the administration and they hate the fact that they can't control uh, the conservatives. And they hate the fact that it is all working. They hate the fact that everything Obama did is now undone within a year, which thank God for Trump. They hate everything about Trump. They hate everything about conservatives. They hate everything about Christians. They hate everything about Republicans, except the establishment Republicans, which I'll probably do a program on that in the near future. But conservatives, Republicans, Christians, right-wingers, Tea Party, they hate everything about that. They call us deplorables. They call us gun-toting, Bible-thumping rednecks. You call me whatever you want, but my point is they hate everything we stand for. Another conclusion we can draw is that the double standard is not only okay, but it is expected and encouraged. Liberals get a free pass. Republicans are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Let me give you a good example. Remember Judge Roy Moore down in Alabama? And those ladies came forward and accused him of whatever it is they accused him of, and it cost him the election. Remember that? And I said at the time, I did a special edition one time, and I said in that, this is a smear job by the left-wing liberals, and as soon as this election is over, that story is going to die, and nobody will ever be prosecuted. No proof will ever be done, and he will never be prosecuted for that because it's all a smear job. And it was about women came forward and said things happened 30 years ago. Remember that story? Let's fast forward to the Democrats now. Now, he was a conservative Republican. Now we have a Democrat in Wisconsin who 2 women have come forward and accused him of abuse. No big deal. He still gets elected. He's made out to be a hero. He's a Muslim. He's a co-chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Nothing's going to happen to him. Double standard. That's a good example. Another conclusion is they have no new ideas. The ideas we're going to cover, the stands that they have, are the same as they were 30 years ago. Here's another conclusion. They have no new stars in the Democratic Party. Think about who they have to run right now. Bernie Sanders, 76. Hillary Clinton, 71. Who was the vice president under Obama? Biden, Joe Biden. He is 72. That's the front runners. Now, the rumor is that the governor of Virginia, who used to work for Clinton, is thinking about running. He's younger, and by younger I mean in his 60s, but they have the Democratic Party has no new blood. They have no stars coming up. The Republicans have all kinds of them. And we saw several of them running for president. You know, the governor of Wisconsin, the senator from Texas, the senator from Florida, young guys. There's a reason they have no new blood in the Democratic Party, because they have no new ideas. And here's a big one. Here's a big one. Here's a conclusion we can draw, and this is a fact. This is not an opinion. They have no God in their platform since 2008. There was a famous thing, and again, if you don't believe me, go Google it. When the Democrats had their first platform for Obama in 2008, one guy got up there and said, "We don't have God in our platform. Should we put him in?" The guy got booed off the stage. The Democrats don't want God in their party. They don't want God in the government. They don't want God in the party. They don't want God anywhere. I did a program one time, and I called it, "Can you be a Democrat and a Christian at the same time?" And the conclusion was no. You cannot be a Christian and believe anything that the Democrats believe, because their beliefs are anti-God. Download a copy of the Democratic platform and see if the word God is mentioned in there. It's not. Another conclusion is the Democratic Party is now against our Constitution. Now, they will tell you they're not, but look at their stands. They want to control speech on the social websites. That is diametrically opposed to the First Amendment in our Constitution that guarantees free speech. You don't get to control speech even if you call it hate speech. You don't get to control that. You can prosecute that if you want to, but you don't get to police that and control that and eliminate that. The social websites, I did this story last week, went through and got rid of InfoWars on like a half a dozen different social platforms all in one day, because they said they violated their standards. He has not. Now, what he is he's a conspiracy theorist. He's a Republican. He's anti-democratic. He's anti-liberal. He's anti-socialist. And they don't like what he has to say. You don't have to like him or dislike him. You do not get to control somebody's platform just because you don't like what they say. The Constitution is very plain. We have freedom of speech. They are against that. They are against guns in this country. That goes directly against the Second Amendment in our Constitution. You don't get to decide that. These are God-given rights, and our Constitution states that. Another conclusion we can draw is that violence is promoted by the leaders of the Democratic Party, encouraged, i.e., Maxine Waters, i.e., the lack of leadership from anybody in the Democratic Party to stop the violence. Another conclusion that we can draw is that the Democrats are actively asking the citizens and encouraging the citizens to resist the federal government. I'm sorry, isn't that sedition? Isn't that the very definition of sedition? But that's what the Democratic Party is encouraging their people to do. What has the Senate and the House done for the first 2 years of the Trump administration? They have resisted everything the administration has done. Resist, resist, resist. And it's not just a quiet behind the scenes. When anything comes through the Senate, the Democrats vote as an entire block. Not one person steps out of line. That's resistance. That's active resistance to the federal government. And that is, by definition, sedition. And that is punishable by prison, by the way. But that is encouraged by the Democratic Party. Another conclusion that we can draw is that to the Democrats, the ends justify the means, which means in their minds, it doesn't really matter what you have to do as long as you get what you want. As an example, it doesn't matter that we're committing sedition as long as we can stall off Trump. It doesn't matter that the Mueller investigation was gotten by illegal means. It doesn't matter. As long as we can get rid of Trump or neutralize Trump, that's all that matters. Never mind the fact that it's illegal, immoral, unethical. That doesn't matter. We'll just do what we have to do to neutralize or get rid of Trump. And lastly, one of the conclusions that we can draw is the Democratic Party has no values. As a Christian, we have values. You know, it used to be a common thing in elections to talk about family values. And that went out the window with Clinton because, well, he had no values. The Democratic Party has no values. They don't want God anywhere around them. They don't care about being illegal or unethical as long as they do it. If a conservative just tiptoes around that line, they're all over them asking for the resignation. They have no values, and that's too bad. Now, I want to go down, now that we know the state of the Democratic Party, and we've drawn some conclusions about the Democratic Party, I want to go through, and I remember I said that they have policy stands, they don't have values or beliefs. Well, let's go down and let's take a look at the where the Democrats stand on issues. The Democrats this upcoming election are going to run on raising your taxes. I've never known a party to win running on that, but that's what they're running on. They want to get rid of the Donald Trump tax cut and raise your taxes. They want a higher deficit. Now, you would think by raising taxes that would raise the money. That is just the opposite, and this is an example of how we need to educate people. Every month since Donald Trump tax cut went into effect, every month, there has been a new record of money coming into the federal government. Think about that. The reason the deficit is not going down drastically is because of the tax and spend liberals. If we would cut spending like Newt Gingrich did under Clinton, we could have this budget balanced very quickly because we're going to triple our GDP pretty quickly. We've already more than doubled it. We have record amount of cash coming in since we cut the deficits, or since we cut the taxes. If you raise taxes back, growth will slow back down like it did under Obama. Money will stop coming in as fast to the Treasury, and the deficit and spending will go up. That's the very definition of tax and spend liberals. They want no religion, no God, well, no Christian religion. They want to honor the Muslims and the Hindus and Confucianisms and all of the other isms in the world. But Christians are not allowed a seat at the Democratic table. You don't believe me? Go down that list I gave you a minute ago of all the people in the leadership position of the Democratic Party. There's not a Christian among them. You go down the Republican side and you will see all kinds of Christians. They are pro-death. Oh, did I say that out loud? I meant pro-abortion, or pro-choice is what they call it. That is the Democratic stand in the party. That's the litmus test. In fact, you're going to hear that a lot when this, I think his name is Kavanaugh, comes up for the Supreme Court, and the senators get on there and try to tear him apart. It's all going to be about Roe v. Wade. It's all going to be about abortion. You watch. That's their litmus test. They are pro-homosexual rights, pro-homosexual marriage, pro-homosexual anything. And along with that is the LGBT, LMNOPQRST rights and every minority right in the world except Americans. White, middle class, average Americans. They are anti-us, but they're pro-homosexual. We talked about this earlier. They are anti-gun. Now, the Democrats will say, oh, no, we're not. We just want tighter controls. Well, that's anti-gun. You know, they are anti-gun. If the liberals in Washington had their way, they would confiscate every gun in America, and they will tell you with a straight face that when you confiscate the guns, there won't be any more murder. Go talk to the police in Chicago. Chicago has the toughest, strictest gun laws in the country. And they're setting record paces of murders up there. They had 70 murders in one weekend in Chicago. They want more regulation. Remember I said that socialism controls the means of production. Since we're not socialist, they get their ways by creating mountains and mountains and mountains of regulations hoisted on the government or hoisted on businesses. And under the Obama administration, the coal industry is a good example. He single-handedly just about put the coal business out of business. Trump came in and reversed that, and our coal industry is going crazy right now. They want more regulation on everything. The Democratic stand is they are anti-business and anti-Wall Street. How do you expect, as a politician, to govern a successful country if you are against big business or against Wall Street? Wall Street, no matter what you may think, in a year and a half after Donald Trump became president, the stock market went from right around 19,000 to right around 27,000 is where it's at now, 26 and change. Now, for every 1,000 points, that's $1 trillion in new wealth. $7 to $8 trillion of new wealth has been created in the stock market just since Trump became president. Think about that. And the Democratic Party is against that. They are anti-capitalism. You don't think so? Think back to the Obama administration. He said too big to fail and gave a bailout. You know what he really did? Is he had thousands of czars that were accountable to nobody but him. And in order for these companies to receive a bailout, he went in and took over. These czars went in and went onto the board of directors. These czars were given unlimited power. They controlled how much these businesses were able to pay people and their CEOs. That was government control. And when it was all said and done, AIG took them to court and won, by the way. As a result of that, Chrysler Corporation is no longer an American company. It is now an Italian company owned by Fiat. The board of directors, the majority of the board of directors of Chrysler, after they bought them out, was fired, and they brought in Italians. The union up there sold out because Obama had given them a share in the company. One of his czars did that. So they took that and they sold it to Fiat. So now Fiat owns everything up there. And guess what? Chrysler's now in the toilet. It's true. Fiat as a company is doing well, but Chrysler is doing very poorly. The Democrat stand is anti-capitalism. They are pro-socialism, and we've covered that in detail. They are anti-America. How can you be against Make America Great Again? But Cuomo, the governor of New York, came out this week and said America was never great. So how can we make it great again? This coming from an elected governor worth $5 million, whose dad was a 3-term governor of New York, and he thinks America was never great. Wow, he really has not lived where the average American lives. It sounds to me like he's gotten a really good ride out of America, just like Clinton, who is anti-America, and just like Obama, who is anti-American. But they're all worth millions of dollars. Seems like America been very, very good to them. They are anti-free speech. The liberals and the social media sites, by the way, are all owned by liberals. And they are trying desperately to find a legal way to silence the right-wing conservative on all sites. That's been the goal, and they're working towards that. And the liberals in the government are working with Zuckerberg and the others out there to make it appear like it's legislation, but what it's really going to be, and I've been saying this for several years now, what it's really going to end up being is silencing the right. They are anti-free speech. They are pro-big government. The, the Democrats believe that government can solve any problem. The bigger the government, the better they like it. I can't think of one problem the federal government has ever solved. Ever. The example I was given when I was in school was at Tennessee Valley Authority, where they went in there and they were supposed to build a dam and control the electric, and it never happened. It was just a big fat boondoggle. A current example was Donald Trump with the ice rink in New York City. It's in his book, The Art of the Deal. Government screwed that up so many times and spent so many millions of dollars, and Trump went in there and got it fixed in 6 months. Under budget and under time. Big government never solves problems, but Democrats always believe they do. Democrats believe that the government should control your life from cradle to the grave. They want to provide free education, free health care, uh, minimum wage, minimum living wage, whatever term that happens to conjure up, free nursing home, free transportation, free daycare, uh, all the way till the day you die. They are pro sanctuary cities and states, which is, again, by its definition, is sedition. When you disobey what the federal law says, and you do it outwardly, and you do it openly, and you do it legislatively, that is sedition at the very least. But yet they are pro-sanctuary cities. That was the main reason for the Civil War, by the way, not slavery. They are anti-military. You don't believe me? You go back and check the history of military budgets under Democrat versus Republican parties. That they always, that's the first place they cut, is always the military. Now they will tell you, and they tried to make a distinction when HW went to war because they came out against the military and the backlash was so strong, they came out and then they had a new saying: we support our soldiers, but not the government, not the war. That is a distinction without a difference. They are anti-military, always have been, always will be. They are pro-illegal immigration, which means they are against the wall. They are against any form of reform in legal immigration. And I've done stories on immigration. I'm not going to go into all of that, but all of the things that make sense for our country. As an example, we have something called a lottery. This is for legal immigration, okay? So let's say that in a year, they have 500,000 lottery green cards, which means they contact all these countries around the world and say, hey, we don't have anybody from your country represented this year. So send us all the names of everybody that wants to come to America. We'll put them in, put their names into a hat, and we'll draw out 500,000 of them. And they do that from all the way around the world. No vetting, no background checking, just put your name in a hat and we're going to let 500,000 of them in. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. You could be getting Muslims, murderers, rape, and we do. Murderers, rapists, thieves, jihadists. I mean, and the Democrats don't want to change that. They want to leave it just like it is. In fact, they want to expand it. They are anti-wall. The Democrats do not want that wall down across Mexico. Ask yourself why. Because they want those illegals coming in. And it has nothing to do with immigration. It has to do with votes. Well, that is our in-depth look at the current state of the Democratic Party. It's not a very rosy picture, and it wasn't very fun for me to do. Years ago, I was still a right-wing Republican, but at least I felt like we could have a civil discourse with Democrats. We could sit down and talk about a discussion, a difference of opinion and ideas. As an example, conservatives and liberals alike wanted a booming economy. They thought the government could do it. We thought conservatism could do it. We can't even get the Democrats to agree that the economy is booming today. We can't have a discussion about ideas. They don't want to talk about ideas. They have no new ideas. The Democratic Party has changed, and that's too bad. That is bad for our country. We need to be able to sit down and have a rational conversation about the difference in ideas and be able to negotiate that. Now, my viewpoints happen to be ultra-conservative right-wing, but I should still be able to sit down with Chuck U. Schumer and have a rational conversation about our ideas and come to some type of a conclusion. And a good example is going to be the infrastructure deal that Trump wants to do. Every liberal Democrat since the beginning of time has always been about building infrastructure, using the federal government to build highways and bridges and railroads and utilities. How can you be against that? But when Trump proposes this, I guarantee you the Democrats will oppose it because they have no beliefs. They have no values. It's just resist, resist, resist. And that's the sad part. It used to be if Trump would have submitted this, we would both agree that infrastructure needs to be done, but just differ on how we do it. But something would get done. It's not going to get done unless we get out and vote for conservatives over the liberals. If we do that this upcoming election and give Trump what he needs in the Senate and get rid of Chuck U. Schumer as majority leader, if we can get those two things done, we'll get the Trump agenda through. But that's a big if. So go out and vote. Today's program I did mainly to show you what the difference is. And for those of you that just go vote straight Democrat, the Democrat Party that you think exists doesn't exist anymore. The party that I just described, that's the Democratic Party today. That's what you'll be voting for. Well, I want to end by just talking to you again about the prayerboxministry.org. If you'd like to know a little bit more about who we are and what we do, go over there and check us out at prayerboxministry.org. That website is an interactive website. Also, all of our right-wing reverend programs are on iTunes. So go over there, click on podcast, and look for Right Wing Reverend. All of our programs are there. Word has finally gotten out about us over there on iTunes. The viewership has like tripled in the last few weeks. So go over there and check us out. Right Wing Reverend on iTunes. Well, that's the program for this week. You guys have a blessed week. And I look forward to next week when we sit down and talk about this week in politics.